Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to GBTA Georgia Chapter's January 2021 meeting. Happy New Year to all. I hope your holidays were amazing and that we're ready to start the new year off strong. We're happy to have Mike Daly with us today, Vice President of Serko. He's going to speak to us today on traveler confidence. Excited to hear his presentation. Just a few notes before we start. Where typically we ask you to unmute or mute yourselves the whole presentation. Speakers requested that to be more interactive, you can unmute yourselves during the presentation, but please be mindful of any background noise. As I don't want to have to go in and auto mute everybody. So if you could be mindful of that, that would be awesome. We want to thank our sponsor for today, Jekyll Island. We'll have a brief presentation from Maria Trammell, who's here on behalf of Jekyll Island. And I do believe that is all I had. I'm making it short and simple today. And we're going to go ahead and hand it off to Rick George, who will speak to you on sponsorship needs, as well as the sponsor introduction. So Rick, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Dwight. Happy New Year to everybody. Great to see some faces returning and great turnout for our first meeting of the year. So thanks, everybody. It is a need request, folks, that I'm definitely asking from a sponsor standpoint. We are still looking for a number of platinum sponsors, as well as other categories for this year. And if there's interest, opportunity within your companies, please reach out to me or to anyone on the board, and we'll make it work for you for this year. But there is a significant number of opportunities left from a sponsorship standpoint, and any help could certainly be and will be very much appreciated. But we do have 3 new sponsors since we last met, which is super news. And I really want to thank all 3, the Southern Company, CTM, and my own company, Grasp Technologies. I'll be writing the check probably tomorrow as a gold sponsor. So we know money's tight. We know we're still uncertain as to when travel is going to be coming back in full, but we certainly thank these new sponsors. And especially Jekyll Island for being our kickoff January sponsor for 2021. And Maria Trammell has been a great friend of our Georgia chapter for many years. And Maria, we really, really appreciate it. And with that, I will give you the floor. And again, we thank you very much.
Hi, Rick. Hi, everybody. We appreciate all of you and welcome into 2021. And I am coming at you from, I wish I could say sunny Jekyll Island, Georgia, but I'm here in Peachtree City, Georgia. And so anytime you guys need any help with your meetings at Jekyll Island, most of you are in the Atlanta area, I am here to help you. And, we're still celebrating Christmas at Jekyll Island. Our Christmas lights are up. Everybody needs to get out of town and take a break and getting over the holidays. So I invite you to go down and check out our Holly Jolly Jekyll Christmas lights still. And then enjoy the beach with this weather you can. But welcome to the new year and Happy New Year. And we just have a short video and we invite you all to come visit Jekyll Island if you have any meeting needs or just come down and enjoy our beaches and our historic areas. Thanks so much and have a great day.
Maria, thank you so much for that. And your sponsorship this year, we greatly appreciate that. And with that, I will turn it over to Kim Kearns, who is over our speakers and education, and she will be introducing our speaker for today. Kim, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, and I'll add my wishes for a happy new year to everyone as well. It's great to see so many people joining us today. Very excited to kick off the year, and we have a great lineup this year. Hopefully, we'll be back meeting in person before too long, but at least for the next few months, we will continue our virtual meetings. So with that, I'd like to introduce today's speaker, and I'm super excited to introduce Mike Daly, the Vice President of Sales for Serko. And I know this might sound a little weird, but I'm going to start with a thank you to the Major League Baseball strike back, 25 plus years ago, because if it hadn't been for that, then Mike might still be with the New York Mets. But he was unfortunately laid off and came to the travel side of the business with United Airlines 25 plus years ago. And since then, he's had a great, just a depth of experience in travel technology. He was instrumental in the development of online booking at Get There, Travelocity, Sabre. You know, we could go on with the who's who of who he's used his knowledge and expertise to help different businesses get off the ground. He helped grow Freebird and Deem in the corporate travel space as SVP Sales and Vice President of Strategic Partnerships until they were acquired by Capital One and Enterprise Holdings. In 2019, Mike joined Serko, and there he's the VP of Sales and helps grow the company globally with an emphasis on North America. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Mike. He's going to lead us in what we hope will be an engaging, collaborative conversation. So to reiterate what Dwight said, we are not muting everyone overall. We would say, you know, keep yourself mute, but when you're not speaking, but jump in on the conversation. Mike will be sharing a presentation with us to post. And Dwight, I don't know. Yeah, we're recording. Okay, so we'll record this and we'll have that posted as well. But let's all chime in and see what we can do to get corporate travel back on the right track. So Mike, it's all yours.
Thank you so much, Kim. I really appreciate that introduction. And thank you, Dwight. Thank you, Maria. Thanks to everybody at the Georgia local chapter. Really appreciate the opportunity to collaborate with you guys, and hopefully we'll have a lively discussion to talk about what's happening in our industry and different things that we might be able to do to help spur the continued recovery of corporate travel. I've got a lot of stats. I've got a bunch of slides that I want to go through and show you guys. But again, I don't want to have this as a one-way presentation. Before we jump in, though, I do want to reference Kim, since we are in Georgia. And if there are any baseball fans out there, actually a former Met, Ed Kranepool, will be interviewed by Ron Bloomberg, who lives up in Alpharetta. He does a Facebook live blog or podcast every Tuesday at 8 p.m. So if you want any information on that, let me know and I'll send you the link for that podcast. But really appreciate being with you guys today. A lot of exciting things going on. Actually, I couldn't update my presentation fast enough because there was so much information being posted over the last few days since we've hit the new year and even leading up to the end of the year. But let's start by looking back first at the early stages of the pandemic and the shutdown. And an article that really resonated with me was out of the BTE was that the impact of COVID-19 would be 9 times worse than 9/11. So that was back in April on the 21st. And I kind of shrugged it off and said, it's not going to be that bad. We're going to be traveling in June. Everything will be back to normal. We'll be at convention. Maybe that will be pushed out, but everything should be back to normal, by the summer. And of course, this is probably the understatement of the year, right? Because it really was that bad and travel really did go away considerably. And if we look at the numbers, and this is just one resource that I'll share with you guys, the deck will be made available on the chapter website. As you can see domestically, trips are down for the year or ended the year down about 65% based on 2019 volume. When we look at international, as it makes sense, that's a little bit more. But when you think about it, we don't really need to compare this to 9/11 or the financial crisis or the volcano that no one can pronounce. Really, this is the biggest stoppage or slowdown in travel since World War II. So when you think about that, that's 80 years ago. So we're talking about almost a century. We haven't seen this type of volume reduction or slowdown in travel since then. Even when we look at just the pure volume index, and that was looking at the full year of 2020. As you can see, if we started counting from Q2 on, when the shutdown really started to take place, it's even lower than that. It's more than 3 times less than it was in 2019. And some of the information is showing that, again, this is end of the year, that only about 15% of business travelers are starting to book reservations in 2021. But there are some signs of hope, right? Because it's been pretty ugly so far, and probably a lot uglier than these ugly sweaters that I've worn to holiday parties in the last few years. But there are, signs of hope, even though we've had some significant loss of jobs, right? A lot of our friends are looking for work. We see posts on LinkedIn all the time. In the US alone, over 4 million employees in our industry are out of work right now. That's actually more than triple the national average when you look at other spaces. So when you think about the acute impact to our industry, it's been really devastating. Overall, around the globe, people have lost, there's over 100 million people out of work due to the pandemic. And then if we looked at the airline segment, these guys were losing about $230 million per day collectively. So pretty heavy impact. And again, I'm probably preaching to the choir here. You guys have all seen and felt it, but there are signs of hope, right? There are some encouraging statistics in the last few months of 2020, and certainly with the vaccine on the horizon, and mass distribution of various vaccines. A lot of work is being done in the industry, specifically with the airlines and airports, where they're making rapid testing available. You can get paperwork similar to how the global passport programs developed after 9/11, when you could get through security early. There's a lot of efforts being put into making it safe to travel again. So there are definitely signs of life. There's definitely hope right around the corner. And I hope you guys are seeing that too. And I'd love to chat about that as we get deeper into the conversation. Another good indicator, at least for me, and I think a lot of you will agree, is what does Wall Street think? So if you look at Wall Street recently, the airline stocks have been performing a little bit better. So that is also, a pretty good sign that recovery is certainly on the horizon. And there's a handful of factors that are driving that as well. One is demand, right? I know my personal feelings is I want to get on the road as much and as quickly as possible within guidelines, right? I want to be safe as well. You have a supply that's been dwindled. So if you guys recall previously to 9/11, if you're flying around, there are probably a lot of empty aircraft or half full aircraft flying around. And then when travel started to come back after 9/11, most planes were full and remained that way for the next 20 years or so. So I think with the limit in supply as well will drive load factors and the fares. You also will probably have more loans and more legislation that will help the industry to drive positive balance sheets. And then let's keep our fingers crossed that fuel costs remain stable, right? They've been pretty good the last few years. And if those continue to be in the same spots, the cost of jet fuel will continue to be low, and that will drive profits for the airline industry as well. Then let's look at GBTA specifically. Towards the end of the year, right before the holidays, we did send out a survey asking a lot of the membership what their thoughts were on returning to in-person business meetings and events specifically, as Maria was just alluding to. She's got some bookings coming up in the future. I think what was most encouraging about the statistics, and this information is all available on the GBTA website, is that 89% of the respondents feel that internal travel will come back probably by Q3. Not as big as it was, but that some of the in-person meetings and events, they'll start to attend those by Q3. So that's less than 6 months away, right? So there's a lot of things to be thankful for, and a lot of hope in thinking about these statistics. When we think about external travel, it seems to be a little bit more aggressive, right? So if we look at what we think is going to happen in terms of the types of trips we take based on 2019 versus now, right? We'll consider 2020 a wash. Attendance at regular conferences, trade shows, industry events will probably dip. Internal company meetings with colleagues will probably dip, right? We'll accomplish that via virtual meetings. But if you notice that customer engagement will go up, right? And I know that being a career salesperson, that I'm very anxious to get out on the road and visit with prospects and customers. I think you'll see a lot of that in the sales space as well, but you'll also see it with the service trips too. I'm sorry, was there a question? Oh, okay, perfect. But with service trips as well. So folks going out and seeing their customers, if they're in the manufacturing space, repairs, training, equipment installation, things like that. And then in terms of supplier meetings and employee training, that will probably stay pretty much the same compared to where it was in 2019. And again, this is based on respondents that are corporate travel buyers that are providing that information. Now, another area that I think is very positive is from my own personal experience. So the company I work for, Serko, is based in Auckland, New Zealand, with a significant amount of our customer base being in Australia and New Zealand. We've started to see that come back significantly and kind of leading corporate travel recovery efforts in terms of regions. Now, we have some geography that makes that possible, right? The way the lockdowns were handled, but being island nations, we've seen that travel start to come back much more quickly. So if you looked at Australia, it's probably about 33% back to where it was. But then you've got New Zealand is driving a lot of that too, where they were about 85% ending the year of where they were in 2019. We also expect this month legislation to be put in place with the vaccines and rapid testing being available, that a bubble will open up between Australia and New Zealand, as in addition to some select cities throughout the Asia Pacific region like Singapore and Tokyo, where that will launch and that will increase the demand for travel as well. So I think that's a pretty good indicator of how things will start to roll out in the rest of the world, especially as we start to get into the spring. So also, what's happening in our world? So I'd love to hear from some folks. I'll kick us off and talk about, I actually did quite a bit of travel in Q4. But if folks want to share their own travel experiences and what they've seen out there and what they're planning to do, I'd love to hear from them. We'll talk a little bit about why it's safe to travel. What's the science behind it? It's not just luck that planes are safe to be on and hotels are safe and it's safe to rent a car, and what suppliers are specifically doing to do that. And then we'll talk about how we stay informed, right? There's a ton of information out there. It becomes overwhelming at times, but I have found at least that there's a half dozen to 10 or so sources that are really, really valuable in terms of giving me information on an up-to-date basis. And then what can we do individually? Again, I would never encourage anybody to do anything they didn't think was safe or goes against their company policy by any means, but what are some things that we can do to help spur that recovery? And then finally, we'll end the presentation with some resources that you guys can go out and check out on your own that will also be included in this presentation that you can access on the website. So to start, I'll talk a little bit about my own travel experiences. So I had traveled for pleasure a few times over the summer. And strangely enough, I didn't even think about traveling for business. I didn't think about asking a client or a prospect if I could go see them. But I was bidding on a piece of business, and back in September, the client asked us to come and present to them in person. I thought to myself, and we talked about it internally. It's like, yeah, of course you should go if they want to have you there. So then I started thinking about, what could I do to maybe be a little more proactive in that regard. So if you haven't traveled before, some things to expect is obviously you're going to wear a mask the entire trip. That's not necessarily a bad thing in some instances, right? And for those of you who have traveled, that sitting on a plane is probably the most pleasant experience it's been in many years, because you don't have a lot of chatter. You have people on cell phones. There's not a lot of talking going on. Now, of course, there isn't any service either, but again, it's a very quiet and pleasant experience. Because there isn't a lot of food service, bring snacks, right? And give yourself some extra time, even at the airport, potentially, because the lines are going to be longer, because people are shopping a little bit more and buying food to bring on the plane, buying food and drinks. But you will notice that the planes are as clean as they've ever been, and they're as quiet as they've ever been. Once you get to your destination, now this has changed over the last 6 or 7 months or so, because I had stayed in a few hotels early on, back in the May, June timeframe, where I think things were a little bit still up in the air on how to, let's say, contain the virus. So, you didn't have a lot of housekeeping going into rooms. They felt that keeping people out of rooms would be safer. So the rooms weren't as clean, sheets were clean and towels and things like that. But there wasn't a lot of vacuuming. There wasn't a lot of dusting going on in the rooms. That has since changed over the last few months, where each hotel room I've gone into in at least the last 4 or 5 months, you've had a seal on the door. So that they've been in there, that they've been using some enhanced cleaning products, and they're making it safer each time you go in there. On the car rental side, I've got some statistics that I actually got from Heather during your education presentations back in September. Those continue to be safe, and those get better, and the confidence level continues to get better. The only thing I noticed there is if you're flying into an airport that has a shuttle, for social distancing purposes, the shuttles are going to go out with a few seats in between everybody. So give yourself extra time there, because you may have to wait for another shuttle or two before you can get on. And then if you're taking chauffeur transportation, whether it's a black car or limousine provider, or it's a rideshare company like Uber or Lyft, your driver will be wearing a mask, and you'll be wearing a mask. So again, feel completely confident getting into these vehicles, just as I feel completely confident going in a hotel room or getting on a plane. And we'll talk a little bit about that science, but anybody else want to share any of their recent experiences, or if they have questions about an upcoming trip they may have scheduled?
Mike, I'll go. I've not traveled for business since March. We're not doing any internal travel probably until Q2, but I have traveled twice for leisure in August and November, both times to Mexico. And I was very, very specific in how I traveled. Maybe overly cautious. I was specific about the carrier I chose. I was specific about, for the first time, using private ground transportation. I've never done that before. And the hotel that I stayed in. I mean, I was all over traveler reviews to see what was going on with the hotel, what their safety protocols were. And I had a really good feel for the hotel. So I made the August trip, and it was so safe, felt so safe and secure. I went back again in November.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And you know what, Dwight, you bring up a great point, is not only will travel change, but it'll also change the way we prepare for travel, right? In terms of booking, there's probably going to be a little more effort going in, a little more diligence or research on your destination and the suppliers you're going to use. Certainly don't want to play favorites, but we've got a supplier in our backyard here in Georgia who's blocking the middle seat. So yeah, that makes a difference. It makes a difference. That may not make a difference scientifically, I don't know. I'm not a doctor or a scientist, but certainly my confidence level having that seat next to me open makes a difference for me, and just my sentiment on travel. That's great. Anybody else have any experiences they want to share or questions?
Sure.
Hi,
This is.
Michael.
Oh,
Go ahead, Jay.
Okay. Hi there. This is Jay. I just flew back from Iowa via Delta, and of course, it's a great time to fly because I was upgraded going and coming. So there's seats available right
I
now.
haven't been upgraded this much since the Northwest merger.
So thank you to our Delta peeps. It was a great experience overall. They're doing everything right. Definitely so forth. The one area that it didn't dawn upon me, but I had to use a long-term parking situation. It was an airport's long-term parking, and I used their shuttle. And that's the one piece that it didn't really dawn upon me about social distancing. And they did for the most part, but not as much as I would have liked. So that was just one little piece of the puzzle that didn't click until I actually dropped the car off and saw people loading onto the van. So, but everywhere else, the car, the shuttle, and of course the hotel, I stayed at a lovely new home too. In Bettendorf, Iowa, which is great. They're using Clean Stay everywhere, and it's just really a great experience overall. But that was just the one little area that I think we kind of don't really talk about a lot.
Yeah, no doubt. That's a great example. I'm writing that down because I think that's interesting. Because one of the things I did see in an article, I think it was this morning, is that a lot of the individual suppliers and individual airports are doing things a little bit differently. They all have their own initiatives going on. Some are better than others, and some are more advanced than others. So I think that's a good point, is we haven't seen full consistency around the operations yet. Or again, you look at the seat assignments, right? You have some carriers that are blocking middle seats, some aren't. I know that we just did one of these sessions with the folks from the Logan Airport on, and wow, they're doing some amazing things with technology and touchless efforts that have made even the airport experience another level. So I appreciate that, Jay. That's a good point.
Hey, Michael, it's Isabella. Just to tag on Jay's information, Delta is really doing a great job with the middle seat, and also with less people on the fly. If you have two people seated together and they're not traveling together, they actually come up to you and ask if you're traveling together, and they move you to the empty seats that are available to really space everybody out, which is fantastic. There's still snacks are being offered. I've done a couple of international trips, and everything is touchless, paperless, sanitizers everywhere. It's actually, now is the best time to travel.
I couldn't agree more. And we're just talking about really the emotional experience, right? But there is a lot of data behind it as well on why you should feel safe. And I think many of you have probably seen this stat that came out from IATA back in October, where 1.2 billion passengers traveled since the start of 2020, and they had about 44 cases that they confirm that was probably transmitted during flight. And take it a step further, is you start to look at the details too around the different parts of the world, that it's extremely safe while you're on the plane, right? This isn't talking about your entire trip. This is specifically talking about the plane. So of course, my first thought was, well, why is that, right? Is this just a coincidence that it's been safe, or is it actually the result of something? And if you look at what's actually happening on the airplane, it's very interesting. And it makes sense, right? When you read about how this disease gets, or how this virus gets transmitted, a lot of it is taking place in homes, right, at gatherings. And a lot of it has to do with how often the air is exchanged. So if you looked at an airplane, it's actually recycling air 3 times more than it is at a hospital, which is amazing to me, right? And then you start to think about offices and businesses and homes, and it takes even longer for that air to be exchanged. And then when you think about what the filters on the aircraft are doing, and you look at their MERV ratings, and I had to look up what MERV ratings were. They're not Merv Griffin's ratings from the show. They're I forget it off. It's something like minimum efficiency report value or something like that. But you can see that the particulates that are being taken out by the filters on the aircraft are pretty comprehensive. So that's making the air much more, much cleaner than it is in other areas. That being said, you can still see that offices and businesses and airports and hospitals are still recycling the air. But think about the process, and this goes to what you were talking about, Dwight, and how you prepared to travel. The first thing I think most of us are going to do is, how do you feel when you're about to go to the airport? And right after Thanksgiving, I had a business trip planned up to the Northeast, and I didn't feel 100%. In another year or a different year, I probably would have just got on that plane and went on my business trip as is, and it turned out to be nothing. But I didn't feel 100%, so I canceled my trip, and I didn't want to put the people that I was going to meet at risk. I was also going to meet some friends and stay through a weekend, and that their parents are elderly. So it's just kind of that goes through your mind now. I said, you know what? And thanks to Delta and all the airlines, no change fees. So I put that money right back into my credit, and I'll use it at some point this year. But that it starts there. I think it starts with personal responsibility. Is we have a responsibility to be safe, and if you don't feel 100%, you should be traveling. And then once you get to the airport, obviously there's enhanced procedures. We're wearing masks. A lot of airports are taking temperature now. You have a touchless process that's tried and true. It's been in place for many years, and we're all washing our hands, or we're carrying, disinfectant in our pockets. Right? When you get on the airplane, they're as clean as they've ever been. They're going through enhanced protocols to make sure they're clean. And as we already talked about, the air is going to be much cleaner than it's going to be pretty much anywhere else you're going to be in your daily routine. So there is some science behind that there, and that's creating those results. On the hotel side, which a lot of these things were available previously, and to be honest, I was never taking advantage of them, like mobile check-in and web check-in, having the mobile key on my phone, things like that. I would just wait until I got to the hotel, check in then. And I don't know if I thought I would get a better room when I'm standing in front of somebody versus when I'm doing it automatically. But all these things that have been put in place over the years are now being utilized more frequently. And again, they're making it much safer to stay at a hotel, limiting contact with other individuals, and reducing your chances of getting the virus. So when we start to look at some forecasts, and my friend Steve Reynolds at TripBand provided this to me, and this only goes up till June of this year. And I think this coincides a little bit of what we saw with the GBTA survey responses. Is an optimistic view would have us, entering Q3 at about 50% of volume of where we were in 2019. Again, optimistic view. A moderate view, which is probably where we'll wind up, is maybe about 30% of volume of where we were in 2019, which again kind of coincides with what those survey responses said, that most think by once we're into Q3, a lot of that volume will come back. As I mentioned earlier, and you guys who are on this call have probably seen this before, because Heather Pastrick shared this in September with you all, and I love this stat. Because, again, I've always felt that renting a car has been pretty safe since this all started. And this sentiment has continued to trend in that northeasterly direction. So confidence continues to build here, especially now that we have testing, or rapid testing, and now that the vaccine is starting to be distributed nationwide. On the ground side, I have a background, especially when I was at Deem and working with a lot of the traditional black car and limousine providers. And these guys have all been doing a great job, right? Their chauffeurs are getting temperature checks at the start of the day. They're disinfecting the vehicle in between rides. A lot of the larger providers have put air purifiers with UV lamps inside the car. And then everything's getting cleaned out in between rides as well. And if they didn't have partitions installed between the passenger area and the driver, most of these guys have made that investment and put those in between too, again, to keep that, to keep you safe. So how do we stay informed? A lot of resources out there. You know, everybody in the industry has stepped up, I think, and has contributed to this in a great way. Obviously, travel management companies who are on the front lines for us and servicing all of our travelers, they've been great. Suppliers have great information. You know, again, I live in Georgia, so I'm a huge Delta fan, obviously, but they really are great. And even when I'm just taking a trip somewhere, if I'm not even flying, I'll go to Delta's website to look at the COVID information for that destination. So they've been fantastic. My friends at Festive Road have put together the Permissible Travel Network. Scott Gillespie at T. Clara has put together some great information on why we travel in the first place. Ed Silver and Mike McCormick just formed a nonprofit organization called Travel Again, which you can get great info on their project and some of the stats that they're producing. Our own company, obviously, all the booking tools out there are providing great information at the point of sale. And then if you haven't seen Travel and Meeting Society, or TAMS as we call it, that's been a great resource as well. And I don't know if anybody's thinking it's not GBTA or TAMS. I think they both play a great role in working together. It kind of started when ACT went under in the early part of the year, but it really has become something very different. So if you guys have some time, you should go check it out and see what information is out there. So when you think about when you're personally ready to travel again, some great stats from Travel Again. What are the things that are increasing your confidence in traveling? Everything we just talked about, right? Wearing a mask, limiting the crowd size, frequent cleaning, social distancing, etc. And all of these things are happening, right? And they're happening very quickly. And we're seeing them across the industry with all of the different suppliers. I won't bore you by going through all of these slides and reading through them, but this will be available on the website when we post. But again, Scott Gillespie at T. Clara has taken this opportunity because there's a lot of talk, right? Bill Gates said it. Travel will never come back to, more than 50% of where it was. That's a great comment for somebody who owns $1 billion in stock in Microsoft Teams, right? It makes sense. But I don't think that's going to be the case. I think we as human beings crave interaction. So I think we are going to get back out there and travel. And yeah, there'll be a different threshold to where we'll go back to. But as you guys saw on one of the earliest slides, travel continues to increase year over year. And the same will be true, right? It'll start to come back, but I think people will certainly like to look at why we're traveling. I'm a big proponent of that too. If you guys know me, I'm not a big fan of leakage, where we as an industry have tolerated where people can go and book their airline ticket wherever they want. And by the way, before I was a believer, when Get There got acquired by Sabre, the travel manager at Sabre finally said, if you don't buy your tickets through the Get There booking engine that's on Sabre, and by the way, I was living in San Fran, so I wanted to fly United, but Sabre wanted me to fly American, so I buy my tickets independently. But I became a believer when she said she wouldn't reimburse me. But I think you'll start to see that, right? There'll be a number of different camps that will come about where folks will push harder for you to use the official TMC. They will push harder for you to use your official online booking tool. There'll be some that will embrace the omni-channel, right? I know that's a big concern for folks as well, to say, hey, why don't they just book where they want? And there's plenty of companies out there that can help you get that information back. So I think it'll be interesting how all that plays out. There's companies like Shep that can provide information specifically on the coronavirus, and then in the future just basic destination information, regardless of where you book. Now, of course, there's pros and cons to that as well, right? There's security issues on having something sitting on your browser and watching where you're getting travel information and where you're booking your flights. But I think it'll be critical for all of us when we think about how we're going to manage spend in the future, is we're going to need to have that information one way or the other. So regardless of your preference on how you pull that information in, if you want to provide a level of duty of care to your employees, you've got to know where they are, right? You got to know where they've booked. So there's going to be a lot of questions to ponder in this post-pandemic world. And if I'm expected to know where my employees are and ensure that I'm looking out for their health, their safety, and their well-being, the first thing is that I got to know where they are, right? So what can we do as stakeholders in this industry? I think my enlightenment came is when my customer invited me to come visit them, right? They had a big conference room. We spread out in the room. There's plenty of space in between for everybody. We wore masks until we got in the conference room. So if you're a buyer out there and you feel comfortable with it, invite your partners, invite your suppliers to come visit you. You don't necessarily have to meet in the office either, right? I've had some lunch meetings. We've had some dinner meetings. And the same on the supplier side. I mean, I don't be pushy, but ask your customers and prospects if they're comfortable in seeing you, and then go for a visit, go see them. I think that's where it starts in getting people back on the road, is we as travel industry professionals can set the example, right? We can go out there and get on a plane and go visit customers and partners, and that's going to really push everybody to get back in the saddle, so to speak. So I'm just going to close with a couple of different resources that you guys can look for and get information moving forward. This again will be in this deck as we published it on the website, but there's the Ready Safe Travel Initiative coming out from GBTA, which is kind of in line with this. So you'll start to see some more information, some more documentation being promoted and published through all the chapters. We have the convention in Orlando, fingers crossed, that is on for now in July. I mean, I think we're all reasonably confident it will happen, but it'll be different, right? It's not going to be the 10,000 person show, and I don't think you're going to have all the big parties and the dance floors and everybody on top of each other in the past, but I do think it'll take place, and I think there'll be a hybrid nature to it, which is expected, right, and is reasonable. We did do the collaboratory series the last few months of 2020, and in particular, the last week of the collaboratory series was a focus on technology. And being on the technology committee, I thought that was the best week. And so I have all of those recordings available. I'll send those out to you as well. So you can check those out at your leisure. We'll continue with what we started in 2020 with what we call the Tech Safari. If you guys haven't had an opportunity to do that, where we showcase 3 new technologies. It could be 3 new startups. It could be an existing player that has created something specific for the pandemic and the return to travel. So I think the next one is in about 2 weeks or so. So keep an eye out for that. And then also, if you have a chance, go check out tamstravel.org. A lot of good content coming out of there. And I think now that it's in 2021, you'll start to see some really cool things that they'll do that will complement GBTA really well. So I know that was a lot, and I sped it up at the end. But any questions or comments, or I'd love to hear some more feedback on what you guys are seeing.
Hey, Mike, it's Dwight.
Sorry.
No worries.
For me, I struggle with perception. So in my head, I know it's safe to travel on planes. I know it. You know, I've heard all of the studies. I've read. I know in my head that getting on a plane is pretty darn safe. But when I think about travel, there's still that perception in my head that why would I want to get on a packed plane? I mean, why would I want to? I mean, why would I want to do that when I can, you know, fly another carrier that's, that's opening seats, and not to say that one carrier is better than another carrier. I'm partners with many of them, and I love our partners. But, when I'm spending my dollars, I'm sitting there, I'll spend a little extra and I have, for these personal flights, fares that I would never normally have paid. So as my travelers come to me, and now it's just it's the billable folks that are traveling for all scripts. It's my job to kind of convince them of something that in my head I have a hard time convincing myself of. So I know that's something that we struggle with a lot within our organization.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think it was enterprise, or maybe it's the national side of enterprise that we're talking about. It wasn't enough to tell people that they cleaned the cars, but they wanted to show people they were cleaning the cars. And I use that example on the hotel as well, where you went into a hotel and it didn't have the seal. There's just that mental image of seeing a seal that gives you a little bit more confidence than not seeing a seal. And I think that's the same with air as well. As there's that emotional feeling of, hey, that seat is blocked next to me and it's not on the other plane, might make that difference.
Yeah, this is Jay again. I have one question that we're kind of hearing and just kind of get some feedback from the group. It's the corporate office reopenings. I mean, some people have reopened, but others have not. And that seems to kind of be going hand in hand with the return to travel. So like, Dwight, I don't know if your offices have reopened in Atlanta, or if there's others on the call that can share kind of where they are. So I think at one point, everyone thought they'd be reopened in January of 2021, but that doesn't seem to quite have happened yet.
Jay, we have not reopened. All scripts will not reopen our offices globally until July 1st.
July 1st?
Yeah.
Mike, I have a question. This is Melody Hayslip from Island Hospitality.
Yeah.
And I'm on the sustainability committee for TAMS. And, one of the things that we deal with almost every subcommittee meeting is, and you had put is the traveler confidence, and the slide that you put out on what would increase your confidence in traveling. Where does the vaccine fall in that percentage? Because as I go through and I talk to people and I hear about the slow rollout of the vaccine, I don't feel that vaccine is in there with, top level of confidence. So I was curious, in your slide, like where would you say from your knowledge and research that fits in there?
Honestly, I think it's pretty high. And I'm wondering, I got to talk with Ed and Mike when this went out. I think this must have went out probably mid-November before the Thanksgiving holiday. So we didn't think that the vaccine would be as readily available as it looks like it's going to be. And obviously multiple companies are providing it. My personal feeling is it probably ranks, it could be even higher than mask required. Right. I think if somebody has the vaccine or you've been vaccinated, I think your confidence level goes way high. I think you're probably pretty a confident person to begin with if you're getting the vaccine early on, and then I think you'll feel pretty confident travel. That's my personal opinion. But Melody, I will follow up with you directly after I talk to Ed and get some details on that.
Yeah, I'd like to
pick
my brain on a few things as well.
Cool.
So yeah, that would be great, Mike. I'll look forward to that.
Absolutely. I've got your info. I'll get in touch with you right after we hang up.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Yep. That was awesome. Anybody else? Thoughts, questions?
Yeah, this is Lisa Gassinger. A question. I took one of the tours of the Atlanta airport one of our airlines offered, and it still felt like to me the TSA checkpoint was still a real hot zone there. A lot of congregating, a lot of the agents were still kind of I'll say loudly prompting people to queue up and move through the line quickly, which made people cluster. Do you know if there's been any more out of TSA to try to improve that process?
I don't have any information on that, but does anybody on the call maybe have some info? Lisa, what I could do on that too is I know GBTA, Dave Hilfman interviewed one of the executive directors from TSA. So I think that'd be a good question that I can take back to them and see if we can get some more information on.
Yeah, I actually listened to that particular webinar that they offered. And I just really kind of didn't, I just didn't get a good feeling that they really kind of had it together yet.
Yeah, I haven't. The only thing that I've heard is airport by airport. What I'll also do, Lisa, is I'll send you over the information that I got from Massport, who runs Logan, Providence, and another smaller airport in that Boston area. Really interesting stuff. And I'm guessing that Atlanta is either on par or close behind what they're doing as well. But it'd be interesting to see how TSA weighs in, because again, I think we haven't seen a lot of consistency. I think we've seen a lot of positive progress throughout the system, but it does vary from airport to airport and carrier to carrier.
So Mike, we have a couple of direct questions and a couple of comments that came up during your presentation. So I'd like to summarize some of those and ask the questions as well. Okay, so yep. The first one is going to be the direct question that came up is not just the vaccine, but as more and more people have recovered from COVID and have the antibodies, won't that expedite the return to travel and companies willing to meet with you?
I think so. I mean, that's my opinion for sure. So in the last couple of months of 2020, when I was ready to travel and I was asking to go meet with people, I was probably getting 25% were amenable to meeting. So if I asked 10 people, hey, I'm going to be in Denver on these dates, do you want to get together? It was probably, maybe it was 3, maybe it's 30%. 3 out of 10 people were like, absolutely, my company's okay with it. My office is or is not open, let's meet here. So I think, as obviously we've had some surges these last few weeks since Thanksgiving, and those that have the antibodies now, I do think that will contribute to the return to travel. Again, it's the more that we're understanding, the more precautions that get put in place. You've got the vaccine, you've got the antibodies, all of that will be contributing, I think, to the return to travel.
Good points, definitely. So going back to what you were talking about with your personal travel, and this is earlier in the presentation when you were talking about packing snacks for the trip, there were a few comments that came in that many of the airlines, and specifically Delta, is providing snacks and water bottles for everyone. And then if you're in first class or in Comfort Plus, many bottles of wine and beer as well. So I know that there are some of the carriers that are making concessions with that. And then Southwest also, when you were talking about the experience, there was comment that Southwest experience has been wonderful the last 4 times that have been flown. And a courtesy email notification to customers scheduled to travel on a flight booked over 70% capacity for booking travel at least through February 28th. So at least the travelers know if the flights are 70% or above full. Let's see, what other ones do we have? Let's see, in talking about the shuttles, the off-site shuttles, the parking spot in Orlando has seats blocks to distance people on the shuttles. So I think that goes back to that comment on, that you're seeing some, variances depending on the supplier themselves. But that's a good shout out for what this parking spot's doing in Orlando.
Yep.
Delta is still blocking the middle seats through March of this year. That's the most recent announcement as far as the time frame for middle seats being blocked. And then a comment on TSA. The biggest challenge is that airports do not all have the same level of mandates. TSA can be very different experience depending on the airport as well. And that's one thing I know we've heard from several different sessions that we've had this year, in that, the airlines are doing a fantastic job, and they're working with the TSAs at the various airports, but there are some varied differences, mass differences, depending on which airport you're flying in or out of. Let's see what else. The TSA pre-check. Here's a plug for anyone flying out of Atlanta. TSA pre-check. The clear lanes have been moved in Atlanta, so it's super quick and easy with the new equipment. But Jay said that he found out the hard way that they had moved. Hopefully you didn't miss your flight, Jay.
No, and it's interesting. It's like if you have pre-check and clear, you go to one section now over by the south, where they opened it up, and when you kind of empty out, you empty out in the T gates, basically. So,
okay.
But if you only have pre-check, or if you only have clear, which I don't know why you wouldn't have both pre-check and clear, then you still go to the original spot where it was. That was my understanding anyway.
Huh, interesting.
So just watch the signs and ask questions, I guess, would be the best thing.
Great to know. And I'll just do a premature plug, but I'll do it anyway. We are working to get someone from the airport to join us on an upcoming meeting. So stay tuned for that. Don't have details yet, but that's what we're working on, to get more information about TSA and airports. Let's see, now talking about when offices are opening. We've had a comment that there are minimal employees in the office at this time. Visitors are not allowed on site. And I've heard that a lot from corporate travel managers as well. And see that we've had a request, would like to hear from CTMs if they'd like to share when do they anticipate corporate travel returning, and is it contingent on widespread vaccines? So is there anyone, and I'll continue the rest of the chat monitoring after, but I'll open it up now. Are there any other corporate travel managers that would like to share what their anticipated corporate travel return would look like, and is it contingent on vaccinations?
So this is Lisa, and we have a COVID incident response team that meets weekly to bi-weekly, looking at case numbers, protocols at destinations, everything we can look at. The vaccine has been a huge topic for us. We are not basing our return to travel on the vaccine. We are basing it more on when the numbers are low enough, and when the travel restrictions and quarantine requirements and those kinds of things start to dissipate more, because right now it's just not feasible for a lot of our destinations for our employees to travel.
So currently there's not travel taking place. Is that correct?
Some travel, anything that is considered essential has to be approved by a leadership team member. And we do have our salespeople on the road, but what we are finding is more of them are driving than flying. So we've seen our numbers increasing steadily in November and December, but we are still down a good 60–70%.
Well, thank you so much for sharing. That's great information. Anyone else? Any other
I
comments
was
on?
just going to say, Lisa, that's great information. It reminded me of something too. I know a few people who traveled up to the Northeast, to New York in particular. And if you look at the restrictions, if you're coming from a certain state, and this person was going Charlotte to LaGuardia, North Carolina was on the list. You have to quarantine 14 days. They were going there for 4. They went in and they went out. And the only thing that they had to do is they were given a form that they were supposed to fill out, but it was optional whether or not you wanted to turn it in. So they could track you and make sure that you're quarantined. So it's again, going with the inconsistency, and I don't think this is a travel industry issue, but it's like, if you're going to have a quarantine, but you're not going to enforce it, it just, you shake your head a little bit. So, and I've seen that in different areas, specifically earlier in the pandemic. I won't mention his name, but he was going to see his son in New Jersey, and we were chatting, and he just flew to Philly, drove across, saw his son, drove back to Philly, flew home. It was Pennsylvania, Florida. So there's all these loopholes that, and by the way, I'm not encouraging this behavior by any means. I'm just pointing out there's, again, going to that inconsistency and the restrictive quarantines that are in there. It's pretty tough to keep up with everything, and I think that adds to the the thought that, hey, let's just wait, right? Let's wait until we can figure this all out. So hopefully in the next month or two, some of this will become much more clear for everyone.
Good point. The last comment that was made, and Lisa, you just touched on this. This was your comment. Continuing to monitor case numbers, and we'll have a soft open, then phased reopen of offices based on that data. No visitors are currently allowed until the final phase, or that's the thought. Any other comments or anything I missed in reviewing the chats? Mike, any final wrap up?
If you want me to come buy you lunch in Atlanta, just let me know. I'm happy to come down and let's have a meeting. Let's talk business, and I'll buy you a sandwich.
That sounds good.
So just let me know. I'm only a couple hours away.
Everybody take, you got that option, or that offer is out there. So I'll take you up on it, Mike.
Absolutely. I will see you soon then, Kim.
Well, thank you everyone for attending, and you will receive a survey afterwards to complete. And we do want to, we'd ask that you complete that. And if you have any comments or anything you'd like to see for future meetings, or if you have any interest in joining me on the Education and Speakers Committee, then I'll give you my personal plug of, please, I would love to have more folks join in setting up the meetings. And with that, Dwight, I'll turn it back over to you. Dwight, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Kim, and thank you, Mike, for being our speaker for today. Great information. I also want to thank Maria Trammell with Jekyll Island for, again, being our sponsor for today's meeting. Kim, you stole a little bit of my thunder about the survey. But thank you.
I'm notorious for doing that, aren't I?
No, I appreciate it. So thank you for mentioning the survey. You will get a copy of that, or you will see that once this meeting ends. Please take a moment to fill that out. We'd appreciate your response. Also remember to support our social media platforms on Facebook and LinkedIn. As Kim mentioned earlier, we have not locked in our February meeting at this time. We are still finalizing that, so look for a communication to come out sometime within the next week that will give you some details on that. I think we're going to have an exciting Q1 And I know Kim is all geared up to give us another year of fabulous speakers. And with that, I do believe I'm going to give you back about 40 minutes of your day. So again, thank you for taking time out of your busy day to be with us today for our meeting. And we look forward to seeing you next month. Take care, and we'll see you soon.